Hello and welcome to an episode of Historically Marked. I am Jason in Seneca Falls, New York. I am standing right in front of the Women's Rights National Historic Park and Visitor Center. There's two parts of this, and I'll get into the history of why such museum is here in Seneca Falls. I mean, it's definitely for a big reason, and I'll take you inside and show you some of the exhibits, so come with me. And then this is the building, and that is the Wesleyan Hall. That is actually part of the part 2. We'll be going there later on. But first I'm going to check out this historical marker here. I'm going to read the top part. Welcome to one of the few national parks dedicated to a social reform movement, women's rights. Here in Seneca Falls and Waterloo, in living rooms and on front porches, in private and in public, a group of 5 women started a movement that would transform American society. In 1848, those 5 women summoned reformers from across the Northeast to the Wesleyan Chapel in Seneca Falls. For 2 days, as many as 300 women and men considered the role of women in a democratic society. They emerged with a Declaration of Sentiments, a document that shaped a reform movement for decades to come. Indeed, it continues today. Women's Rights National Historic Park includes the Wesleyan Chapel, again, right over there, and the homes of some of the movement's organizers, places where radical thought turned into enduring improvement for millions across the world. I will not be visiting the house in Waterloo, the McClintock. I thought about stopping by the Stanton House, which is on the other end of town, is what I'm told, and also the Hunt House, which is also in Waterloo. Unfortunately, I will not be going there. Well, it's closed for restoration anyway, so it says on here. But Stanton is from here, and I'm going to go ahead and take you inside. And if you want to check out the museum, it's on the 2nd floor, but there's a gift shop and a few things to check out on the 1st floor. And you can also get your National Park stamp booklet stamped. And if you want to see the exhibits, they are upstairs. And as you're going up the stairs to the 2nd floor, there are many images talking about men and women stereotypes. The first women's bank, hired him, he's got great legs. And then some quotes and a quilt. I'm not going to show you all the platforms, I mean, because there are a lot of detailed things I could read, but I will show you some of the most interesting ones that I've found. Here's a section on the civil rights movement. Fighting the good fight. Women's campaigns spring from many concerns. Temperance, abolition, and suffrage were some of the earliest movements. The anti-lynching campaign in the late 19th century brought African-American women together under the leadership of Ida B. Wells. Their protest was a matter not simply of rights, but of life and death. Women have also been dedicated pacifists, representing, in Carrie Chapman Catt's words, the mother half of humanity. The Equal Rights Amendment has been one of the most important post-suffrage campaigns. First publicized in Seneca Falls in 1923 by Alice Paul's National Women's Party, the Equal Rights Amendment failed to acquire ratification and was removed from consideration in 1982. And there are lots of displays where you can read, and a lot of it is very detailed, like this one's about the Underground Railroad over here as well. And this platform is about women and education. Arguments for women's education developed slowly. In the late 1700s, few women attended any secondary school, but by the early 1800s, female seminaries gave some women the skills necessary to raise good citizens in the new American Republic. By 1840, normal schools offered training to women who wanted to teach elementary grades. Only at Georgia Female College, which offered the BA, and at Oberlin College, which admitted women in 1837, could they pursue a college degree. But after the Civil War, private women's colleges and coeducational land-grant colleges opened their doors to women. Since then, women have struggled to extend educational options to meet their needs for knowledge and skill. I'm just going to kind of show you around what to expect when you're here. From pickets to prison. Women in physical education. To meet the commonly made charge that higher education damaged women's health, the first women's colleges include exercise programs. Limited Indian club exercises predated active rope climbing and team sports, but by the 1920s, enough women had training in physical education to play professional golf, baseball, and tennis. In co-ed high schools and colleges, women's team sports lagged behind men's sports in funding and number of programs. Male coaches argued that their more strenuous programs encouraged school spirit because men's teams traveled to play against other schools, while women's teams played against each other in high school. And here's a very interesting display. Now, when we were kids, we were taught what was for girls and what was for boys, among many things, like toys, for instance. Girls played Barbies, guys played G.I. Joes. This side is, female, or for girls. And then here, like, do guys want to play with Bert and G.I. Joe, or what is that, Transformers? And police cars. But it says here, toys for boys and girls. One of the ways that children learn what it means to be a boy or a girl is through playing with toys. Playthings often reflect parental expectations about children's future roles and opportunities. Are there any toys here that you would not let your child play with? Another interesting one is about, in 1870, only 15% of all women worked outside the home for wages. Most of them worked in factories or in the fields. In 1870, 85% of all men worked for wages. They had many more choices than women did. Look into the crystal ball to see what you could do in 1870. Well, guys could be doctors, farmers, cotton mill workers, manufacturer, bookkeeper. And then women, they had very limited amount of choices. Teacher, farm worker, seamstress, laundress, a servant. Next to the toy exhibit is a thing titled "A Stereotype is Born." Think about others. You don't want to hurt their feelings. Boys don't play with dolls. You're a sissy. Big boys don't cry. Next time, punch them in the nose. Be nice and quiet like a good little girl. You're a tomboy. You're so pretty in your new dress. Now, things so different today. Alright, and then that is an old book or magazine from a fashion book from July 1864. And then here is, I guess this is probably from the last few years, but there's a picture of Kim Kardashian, and then, yeah. Here's something about the beauty aids for women. As we all know, mostly women have over the years worn a lot of beauty products, like lipstick, and well, I'm going to show you the rest down below here. But here's a little timeline. Beauty aids for women and men have been aggressively advertised in the U.S. since the 1870s. Some products indicated social status, like rouge and eye makeup were associated with actresses and prostitutes until the 1920s, when white middle-class women began to use them. And then hair straighteners and skin lighteners helped blacks look more like whites. And then I'm going to go ahead and show you down here. Actually, this one looks interesting. In 1873, administrators at Ohio Wesleyan University tried to ban false hair because women students were spending too much time fixing it. So down here, in the 1920s, annual sales of lipstick, if placed end to end, reached from New York to Reno. And for a more, modern era, in the 1950s, cosmetic companies spent up to 80% of their budgets on advertising. And then the plastic surgery era. In 1989, surgeons liposuctioned 200,000 pounds of tissue from 130,000 American women. 11 died. Like Ultra Slim Fast, I remember Diet Trim. And here's another thing about women's fashion. Dressed to like dolls. So I'm sure you've seen those old photos where women had hourglass figures because they had to wear like a belt that really tightened their body. Well, it took a toll on them, as explained right here. In the 1840s, an hourglass figure with rounded shoulders, tiny waist, and rounded hips was considered attractive for both men and women. Men extended their shoulders with padded coats, but women damaged their bodies to achieve the fashionable shape. The more comfortable, equally modest bloomer costume came to symbolize middle-class women's desire not only for freedom of movement, but also for political and economic freedom. Here's a little diagram. It's kind of hard to turn the camera against the glass. So the Wesleyan Chapel opened in 1843, March of that year, and the First Wesleyan Methodist Society of Seneca Falls resolved to build a house of public worship where it would later be known as the House of Free Speech. In October of that year, they dedicated the new brick church described as well finished on a good site and in a neat and plain manner. And it was one of the first churches in the U.S. to support the abolition of slavery. At a time when few places allowed anti-slavery meetings, the Wesleyan Methodists opened their doors to abolition and other social reform speakers. So fast forwarding into 1980, at the urging of concerned citizens, Congress established Women's Rights National Historic Park of that year. The federal government would purchase the former Wesleyan Chapel in 1985. And then in 1987, the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Park Service held an international competition to create a design that would protect and highlight the remaining historic elements. And the water wall and lawn are part of the winning design. And then in 2010, the National Park Service determined that the best way to protect the historic wood, bricks, and plaster from weather was to envelope them in a new structure. So, very much like the original building as possible. And they've definitely done a great job. So I'm gonna go ahead and go in and check the place out. Less than 5 years after the chapel's dedication, the first Women's Rights Convention, one of many reform causes, found a venue here. Now on July 19th and 20th of 1848, 5 women held the first Women's Rights Convention in the Wesleyan Chapel. At the convention, the Declaration of Sentiments was read and signed by 100 of the 300 convention attendees. Among them was supporter and friend to all these women, a man by the name of Frederick, an abolitionist and lifelong women's rights activist. There is also a historical marker. I'll show you right over here, get closer to it. Yeah, this was put up in 1932 by the New York State Education Department. First convention for women's rights was held in this corner in 1848. And then I'm going to see what this marker says over here. It's basically about women's rights in the National Park Service, how it has historic sites in Seneca Falls and Waterloo. But it's just kind of a reminder where you can visit other places in New York State, such as the Harriet Tubman Home, Eleanor Roosevelt National Historic Park, and the Matilda Jocelyn Gage Home, and the Susan B. Anthony House, which is in Rochester. All right, thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Historically Marked. I am Jason in Seneca Falls, New York, just outside the Women's Rights National Historic Park. All right, sign off.